Hey there, Lorenzo here. In this video I want to go over LLM APIs, not using an SDK, but using just raw HTTP requests to see what's happening under the hood. Stuff that we don't see when we are using SDKs. So let's go at it. This is the repository where I'll be saving the code. So if you go to Anthropic API, you have the first script here just to test that your API key is working, and then we'll have here a Postman collection and a Postman environment because I thought that's the easiest way to see what I'm trying to show you. So let's open a Postman right here. So you will see a couple of different folders here. So let's start with the basics. So the first thing that we are doing, and let me open this right here. So we need to remember that at the end of the day, we are just doing an HTTP request, regardless of which client library you are using. So right here we have, the most basic request where we have the endpoint, then we have the model that we are requesting. In this case, I'm just using Haiku to save some money. There's no need to do outputs here. And then we have the system prompt and then, the list of messages. So if we send that, we expect the response. And here we see that the role now is an assistant and we get the actual text response along with some other usage on the input tokens and the output tokens. So that's pretty easy. Let's look at now how we can have a conversation, right? Because this was just a single turn. But the idea is that something that we need to keep in mind is that the APIs are stateless. There's no session being stored, there's no memory. So every time we are hitting the API, we need to send the entire conversation, which is very important when we are talking about cost. So this is a way to show that. Here we have, my name is Alice. That's what the user sent the first time. Then we get the response from the assistant. So we append all that, and now we have one more user message, what is my name? And if we see that, the LLM has the entire conversation, so it will correctly say that your name is Alice. But if we were to change this, and we say, what is my name? Sorry, let me change it here. So let's do that. So what is my name? The LLM will have no idea what your name is because the API, once again, is stateless. Now let's talk about tool calling. The first difference is at the request because now we are passing the tools schema. So we are specifying the available tools for the LLM to use in this format where we have the name and then we have a description that the LLM will use to decide which tool to use, and then the input schema with the arguments and the type for each argument. So in this case, we have a single tool, get weather, and we are passing a message, what's the weather in Austin, Texas? That's where I'm at the moment. So we'll send that. And what we get is first a text content. I'll check the current weather in Austin for you, and then we get the tool use. So this is different. So you can see here the type. This is tool use, this is text, and here we have the name of the tool and then the input parameters. What we need to remember is that when we're talking about tools, the only thing that the LLM will do is tell you the tool that the LLM wants to execute. But the LLM is not executing anything, it is up to the runtime to execute. So then what we would do is run that tool within our runtime, within our environment, and then pass that as another message. And we'll see that in a second. Let me close this. So, and let's look at one more thing here. So if I run it again, this is very important. So we get the typed tool use, and then we have this ID. So whenever we are passing the result back in a new message, we need to make sure that we include this ID. So let's show that here. What do we have? We have, again, the model specification, the tools available. And again, remember, there's no memory, there's no session, so every API call, you will need to pass all the tools available. So when we are talking about agent design, the best approach right now is to have different agents for different things, as opposed to a single agent with 55 different tools. So, okay, so let's run this again, and now we are going to capture the tool ID. So let's keep track of this. And what we are going to do now is to pass the result of that tool call. So if we look at the ID here, that's the same one as what we see here, ending in FU. So we are passing that. So let's look at the flow of the conversation. The first thing is, what's the weather in Austin? Then the assistant says, hey, I want to use this tool. And then the user is passing in the content a tool result. So tool use, tool result. And we have the matching ID here and the actual content, the output from that tool call. So we send that, and the LLM correctly says, hey, the weather is in Austin is currently 95 degrees and sunny. So what we are starting to see is that, again, the API is stateless. We need to pass everything. Every call that we make, we need to pass all the tools, and then we need to keep track of this conversation. And the LLM is not executing anything. It is just telling you what to execute. So now we can build on that, and now we can talk about parallel tool calls. Because if we ask a question like this, compare the current weather in Austin, Denver, and Miami, and we have get weather, the LLM will correctly say, hey, I want to call the get weather function for Austin, for Denver, and for Miami. So then what we need to do after running those tool calls, we need to pass for each. So you will see first the user, compare the current weather, the assistant is coming with all the 3 tool calls, and then the user is passing the result for each tool call. So that's very important. You have to have that pair of tool call and tool result. And let's look at what this one is doing. I do not remember here. Oh, interesting. So this is important. We should always be passing something to the LLM, even if the tool call failed for whatever reason. So in this case, again, we have the same prompt. What's the weather in Austin? The assistant comes with the tool use, and now what we pass is this with the flag for an error, and then the content specifying what the error was. So now the LLM correctly specifies that it's unable to retrieve that. That's what I wanted to cover on this video, short, to the point, but the idea is that, again, when we are talking about SDKs, under the hood we are making HTTP requests. The JSON payload is very straightforward. We specify the model. We have a couple of more configuration parameters like the max tokens and other parameters to control the behavior. We can specify tools. If we do, then we're going to get a tool use back from the LLM. We need to execute that and pass that as a tool result. And the APIs, they are stateless, so you need to be appending to all the messages to the conversation. The conversation will grow, and that is how the LLM is able to maintain that context. I mean, we are passing that in every single call. And remember that whenever you are passing a tool result, the role should be user, and you need to pass the tool ID. That's all. Thanks for watching.